Good evening. Today, President Uhuru Kenyatta gave his fourth and final State of the Nation address as the President of Kenya before his first term comes to an end. On News Sources tonight, we shall be analyzing that address as well as doing an audit of the performance of the Jubilee administration during this 5-year tenure that they have been in office. Allow me to introduce my panel tonight. And from the extreme left, we have my colleague Joy Doreen Bira, who is a reporter and news anchor here. Many thanks for joining us. We have Wangari Muikia, who is the MD for Expertise Global. Many thanks for joining us again. And Betty Waitherero, who is a political communications researcher. Many thanks for joining us. And we have right here to my immediate right, Sarah Bakata, who is an editor with the Nation Media Group. Many thanks for joining us tonight, ladies. And later on, actually during this show, we shall also be engaging in this conversation with the Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly, that is Honorable Joyce Laboso. She shall be engaging with us during this discussion from our city center studios. Right, before we get into the conversation tonight, let's take a look at the highlights.
That will result in a reduction in salaries and allowances for those elected in August this year.
Kwa ufupi, rais alikuja kufanya kampeni kwa bunge leo. Haikuwa mambo mengine, lakini ni kampeni ya mwaka uchaguzi ambayo inayokuja.
Kama huyu wewe nimekupoint, there's nothing you're going to do to me, my friend. Ya nini kunichatisha mimi? Unanitisha kwa maana nini?
Many thanks for joining us tonight. My name is Sharon Momanyi. Now, in the address that lasted more than an hour, President Uhuru Kenyatta talked of the achievements of his government, from development of infrastructure to revamped education system. President Uhuru Kenyatta says his government has met most of its pledges to the Kenyan people, while the president says his government has created millions of jobs. The feeling is somewhat a government that has not performed. But let's talk facts and attempt to confirm true achievements and analyze what could be untrue. Let's just first do an audit of the State of the Nation address as was delivered by the president today. Of course, there was a lot of expectations by the Kenyans as this administration, comes to the end of its first term. And I'll start with you, Betty, your audit of this. Do you think they addressed the key issues that Kenyans were looking for the president to address?
I feel that principal issues have been clouded over. I feel that this particular address is not much different from his address in 2016. And I feel that he has repeated himself in terms of the achievements that they have had over the last 4 years. Some of the same achievements have not changed much in terms of gains. There's nothing to show for it over the last 1 year. And then having said that, there are things that he left out, or rather he spoke about it but didn't really speak about. And especially when you're talking about our soldiers in Somalia, you have critical details about a person X whose house you connected to electricity and how old they are, but you do not even have the name of over 500, or of at least 1 out of 500 soldiers that we have lost in Somalia over the last 4 years. And to me, that was quite painful, especially considering that we have lost 57 soldiers just last month. So that to me was quite painful.
So to you would have expected him to at least honor by name these fallen soldiers. And Sarah, I'll talk to you. He, of course, during the entire speech, what we could see is the president trying to weave together the promise that his administration had made in various sectors, from education to energy and whatnot. Do you agree with Betty that this is about a lift of the same speech we got last year?
Actually, I sat through, I think, the more than 1 hour of the speech, and it sounded, I got a great feeling of deja vu. It was like a broken record. There was nothing new. The guy enumerated the same things he talked about last year. It's like he had so many things to say without actually saying anything. So he goes on about, as Betty says, the soldiers. We don't know anything about the soldiers. We have a 1 minute of silence. We don't know who these people are. We never celebrated them. We never mentioned them. He goes on to mention about roads that they have done. We've been discussing this with Betty, and we are saying, okay, let's not even talk about how much those roads cost. My problem was, these are the same roads he mentioned last year. The Taveta to, I don't know, Mombasa to Voi Road, the Bamba Road. He even sang a song. He almost broke into a jig over this song because he's so proud of this. And it's because he's just come from the coast. So he wants to show the people at the coast, guys, we've done much for you. He talks about the Moyale Road. These are the same roads he mentioned last year. He talks about the Mbita Bridge to Rusinga. These are the same things he talked about last year. So I kept thinking, what else is he going to say that is new? There's nothing. He didn't mention the health sector. He didn't mention the state of the education system. Nothing. So here we are sitting and we're talking about, okay, there's so much inflation. There are no jobs. He mentioned them in passing. We were expecting substance, figures in support of everything that he's saying.
Okay, ladies, let's welcome in the conversation the Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly, just to pick up the conversation at that point, and you're all invited to ask any questions that you may have. And a good evening to you, Mheshimiwa. Many thanks for joining us on News Sources tonight. Let's just begin with that conversation. There's that general sense that the address by the President today was pretty much the same one, talking about the same achievements that he talked about last year. What would you have to say on the same?
Thank you very much. I would like to say that some of the things, the way you're mentioning them, it's like things that are just supposed to have happened like overnight. When we talk about a road that is going to be started, and it was not started maybe, or it had just been started last year. So a tarmac road is not something that is going to happen over a very short period of time. So those are the successes that you can look over. In fact, you might even mention them, even for the 5 years, because this was an overview of issues that have changed what the Jubilee government has done in the last 4 years. So, of course, we are going to mention the roads that have been done. Of course, we are going to mention the maternity, free maternity, because all those are a wrap-up of what the Jubilee government has done in the 4 years. And it's amazing that you could actually say that the fact that we had a one minute silence. I don't know whether it would have been more effective if we enumerated the number of soldiers that have died, or just because of the pain, of course. Part of it, of the reason of not actually coming to name them on the floor of the House is really because we know how painful it is.
All right, and yes. Madam Deputy Speaker, the achievements aside, let's talk about the subjects that, were, very evidently out of his speech. For example, the representation, gender representation topic that was conspicuously missing from his address. And as a woman leader, why are you not expecting the President to address this and the milestones that we are, making or not in, having a framework in place for this?
I don't know if that is part of the President's, brief, because actually it is us parliamentarians, the people that have let Kenyans down, if you want to really mention about the gender question, it's really the parliamentarians, because we have tried, we've made every effort possible, especially on the no more than 2/3 rule. But it has been practically impossible for us to get it through, because every time we try, even amongst our coalition, some people ask, you are majority. But I can assure you, when it comes to the gender question, what has been happening is that it now becomes a woman versus man issue, and all the men gang up against the women in the legislature. So really, the President did show commitment while we were trying to go through that process of trying to bring the legislation through. He even went out of his way. He lobbied the men, but in the end, we were just unable to garner the numbers. We were just unable to do it.
All right,
So it is Parliament, I would say, who should be blamed.
Okay, Sarah, you have a question.
Madam Labosa, the problem is not that, that the issue was a problem in Parliament, that the parliamentarians were not helping the president. The issue with his speech, he particularly said, we have concluded the implementation of the Constitution. That is not right, because the gender issue has not been concluded. So in all honesty, what he would have said is, we have tried with Parliament and my office to implement the Constitution, but we are still faced with this challenge of the gender parity issue. That would have been fair. And everyone who said, yes, we know, that one has not been concluded.
Okay. Okay. In that respect, yeah, maybe not mentioning it. You can then say it's not complete because of that factor. But yes. I think it was really sort of saying that if it was a question of implementing the Constitution and ensuring that devolved systems are in place and that they receive the resources that they require, I think that, I believe, was the context in which he was referring to, the completion of completing the devolution process.
Fair enough.
All right, let's talk matters economy now. And Kenya's public debt stands at 50% of its gross domestic product. Less than half of it is in foreign currency. Now, this has put the Jubilee government under a lot of criticism. The stock of Kenya's public debt is likely to hit 3.77 trillion shillings by the end of this financial year on June 30th. This is double the 1.89 trillion shillings in June 2013, when the Jubilee administration took over the reins of power. In fact, the Jubilee government has borrowed more than Jomo Kenyatta, Daniel Moi and Mwai Kibaki's administrations put together. During the State of the Nation address, the Jubilee government claims that there is no cause to worry about the national debt.
I want to assure every Kenyan that at no point has the country been at risk of default or shown any inability to pay its creditors. Stable economic environment over the last 4 years has seen the cumulative addition of 2.3 million new jobs. From this perspective, the state of our economy is robust. Fellow Kenyans, in spite of this good macroeconomic performance, there are still, however, too many Kenyans who are struggling to make ends meet, to find jobs, and to support their families.
All right, I'll come to you, Joy, evidently because this is a business issue.
Yeah.
And of course, there has been a lot of discussion about, we've seen all these figures about, the country making milestones in growing economically. But we can say that the president tried to explain why the Mwananchi is not feeling it. I don't know. But is robust, which is the word that the president has used, what you'd use to describe Kenya's economy?
Well, I think if you're going to take into account the better half of the year, you're actually not going to go with the word robust. But if you're going to take into account the time since he came into office, in one way or another, you can agree with that, because while he could have inherited a huge wage bill, when he was coming in, I think that was actually one of the biggest burdens for him, because at that point we were looking at devolution being implemented or being rolled out for the first time. And of course, that meant that you had to pay governors, you had to pay the entire string of people down there. And of course, add on to that, the members of parliament, the women representatives. So we're looking at the wage bill that actually shot up, and that almost nearly over half or 3/4 of our revenues was being used to pay public servants. And so you can just imagine the kind of economy you would be dealing with if half of your revenues are going into paying public service. And that's just 2% of the population. Absolutely. So if we're looking at whether or not it's robust, I think there's a bit of mixed feelings there, because our public debt has shot up. Right. And inflation right now is at 9.04%. If we're going to look at what the doctors have been going through the past 100 days, robust, that would be 50-50 for me.
All right, and Wangari, of course, this becomes, Joy has just been talking about inflation and whatnot. And of course, we understand that most of our borrowing is from foreign currency, so this makes it even more expensive. Would it be cheaper if we looked at options of borrowing inside, borrowing inside?
Well, I think when you look at debt, the first question that any person should have in their mind is, what is this debt being used for? If we, like Joy rightfully said, the wage bill has gone up, the recurrent expenses have gone up. But if you're borrowing to pay for recurrent expenditures, then that is not advisable, and that is also against the PFM Act. If you're borrowing to finance development expenditure, then that is positive. That is positive debt, because that debt will provide more infrastructure with which revenues can grow in the future.
And we saw the president actually making point about this, that most of the borrowing, if not all, has been for development projects.
Exactly.
Would you say that then
I think that's a positive way of going to it. The other question about the composition of the public debt. You have grants, you have concessional loans, and you have the commercial loans. As far as I know, most of our debt is on concessional loans. The composition is concessional. But more and more, even as we were going to the SGR, the SGR had a large component of commercial loans. So now that's when that starts getting a little bit trickier, because that's very expensive debt.
Okay. And Betty, I'll bring you in. Even as we talk about development issues and economic development and whatnot, we have a rate of 40% of unemployment in the country, if I'm not wrong, whereas 40 out of 100, young people are unemployed. What would you say about it in terms of wholesome development for the country? Does this rate of unemployment speak to where we're going in terms of development?
Well, and it's good that you've brought this up. There are two things that he has said. One, he has claimed that the 2.6 million jobs that have been created. Then he claimed that 1,532 companies, international companies, have invested in Kenya versus the 40 or so that have relocated. But the actual figures, as you have noted, are, and I'm reading it now, so by 2016, the number of Kenyans gainfully employed dropped by 50%, where several manufacturing plants relocated to either Egypt, that's Cadbury's, Samir's Yana Tires to China and India, Procter & Gamble, J&J, Reckitt and Beckinser, and which shut down its Orbit Chemical subsidiary, and the list goes on and on. So given this sort of relocations and the job losses, of which we also know and have felt in the media, in the banking industry, and even in manufacturing, cement and other industries, I really question the claim that you have created all these jobs. Where are they? And then when you look at it in tandem with the sort of payments that we're making from our GDP towards the debt, then you start understanding why it's costing so much money to just feed yourselves, and why Kenyans don't feel this sort of development, this sort of transformation that they keep on talking about.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's fine-tune this discussion. And most of you have alluded to the question of the wage bill. And the Salary and Remuneration Commission today gave Jubilee government recommendations on how to reduce the wage bill, which currently stands at 6.27 billion shillings a year. This makes up to 50% of revenues collected by the government. In short, the government is spending half of your taxes for current expenditure at the risk of development. Uhuru says that half of the money that is taxed is used for wages, at least 2% of the population. Is the government ready to tighten its belt?
I received the Salaries and Remuneration Commission, from the Salaries and Remuneration Commission, an interim report outlining the review of remuneration and benefits for state officers for the period 2017-2022. This report recommends, amongst other things and other measures, a rationalization of the salaries and allowances paid to senior state officers, public servants, elected officials, from MCA all the way to president. That will result in a reduction in salaries and allowances for those elected in August this year.
Kabisa hamna shida hiyo. Kwa ajili sisi wote wafanyakazi wa serikali tunafanyia umma, na hata pesa ikienda chini sio mbaya. Kwa ajili wananchi hao wenyewe ndio umetuweka kazi.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I remember we had you earlier on in one of our earlier bulletins during the day just talking about this issue. And the question is, do you think the 700,000 public servants would take a pay cut? Would you take a pay cut to reduce the wage bill? Is the question tonight.
Yes, I think you've seen it's been done very cleverly. They're not wanting to introduce it now. They would want, for example, for the MCAs up all the way to the president to be done after the elections, so that it would not be a salary that you've already earned. It would actually be a new salary, since if it is, or it would be a salary for a new job. For those who have been there before, well, it would be for them to decide whether they would want to go into that job now, going by the recommendations. So what I want to say is, it's going to be very difficult to implement, I'm sure you know, but more difficult, especially for people who are already in the public service, maybe not members of parliament, because this would not be a salary that you've earned before, unless, of course, you are a member of parliament before. But if really that is the position, that just 2% of the population is earning half the taxes of this country, then and clearly there is something wrong. And the president is right, and even the SRC is right to say that then something needs to be done.
All right.
What that thing is, I think we'll leave it to SRC.
All right. So SRC, Sarah, has recommended that, that the public servants, take a pay cut to, curb this ballooning wage bill. Do you see this as a possible fruitful policy going forth, or are we just going to have the same conversation we've been having over the years?
I don't think... Okay, the proposition is sincere, but the people who are going to be affected by this, I think they will resist, as you expect. Anyone is expected to resist to taking a pay cut. But then going forward, if it's not going to be implemented with this parliament, with this particular political class or government workers, but in the next administration, it might just work.
Right.
And the situation has been wrong for so long. And the problem has been the political class. They want something, they go for it, they agitate, they blackmail, they ambush, they do everything possible. Meaning there's been no level playing field, which has been the issue from day one. If the political class agitates for more and they get it, by whatever means necessary, everybody else falls behind.
Right.
And then the entire economy, everyone moves forward and said, they got, we want. And that is the situation that we were in until yesterday, before we resolved the doctor's strike, before we resolved...
But what happens in a situation where we are also seeing the fact that, when the Jubilee administration was getting into office, they also employed people from the private sector, and that actually also could have played a part in shooting the wage bill up, because when you come from the private sector, it's hard for you to go into public service and take a pay cut. And so unless we are thinking of downsizing the numbers and saying we do not need, just like there's been political talk about some people saying we do not need women representatives in parliament.
Like a collapse of this whole representation system.
Are we willing to do that? And if we're taking pay cuts, what are the percentages? 1% is not going to make a difference, unless it's going to be a 10% pay cut. That's the only way it's going to make a difference for people.
And talking of slimming down the number of employees, I think it's not just about it's not about the representatives. It's not just about MCAs and women reps and parliamentarians. I think CS Rotich last year, December or maybe sometime, issued a memo and said a freeze on government employment, agencies, no promotions, no, such things.
So a complete top-down kind of restructuring and
so we need to find out, was it implemented? That was just December last year. That was December 2016. Were all these things implemented for us to be in a position where we are, if all those things are followed, up to until the moment where we get a new government and slim down the entire employment group, then maybe we might actually get somewhere.
And Wangari, the wage bill is just one, of course, a very huge factor to look at in Kenya's economy. There has also been this argument that with regard to our borrowing, some critics saying that if we continue with the trend of borrowing that we are on right now, for the next 2 years, we could be facing a recession. Is this something that you think is a real danger?
I think for one, the IMF did a debt sustainability analysis for Kenya last year, and they said that with our fiscal and monetary management, that we are still we're not in a dangerous place. The risk is low. So trusting the IMF and understanding that they're probably saying something and they've done the correct analysis, then I am not that worried. I do also want to keep my eye on what they're spending on, making sure that if it's SGR or ICT or agriculture, then those are investments I think that will develop returns in the future. But also speaking towards this wage bill, we also must remember that when we went into devolved government, the local authority staff and the local authorities had been dismantled, they have been retained. And so there's a lot of redundancy in employment at the county level, because even retrenching staff that you don't need is a very expensive exercise. So that's also part of the challenge, that you have staff that are not really doing anything, but because they cannot be fired, then they just have to continue collecting a paycheck.
All right, absolutely. Let's move on now. And tension remains high in Baringo South, where 9 people were killed yesterday. Reports indicate that over 200 bandits raided the area and surrounded GSU and AP camps. Locals say the attackers looted shops at the trading center and burnt an unknown number of houses in the area. At least 11 people have died in the past 2 weeks, despite a heavy presence of security personnel there. Now, who are the bandits raining terror there?
I take this opportunity to warn politicians in the affected areas to stop incitement to any form of violence, for you will indeed be held to account.
And Madam Deputy Speaker, we have seen a lot of lives lost in Baringo over the past couple of weeks. And the President, of course, addressed this also in his address today. Do you think enough is being done? I mean, we have a heavy presence of security on the ground, yet lives are still being lost. Do you think we need a change of strategy, or what is your take about the situation in Baringo?
I'm quite appalled by what is happening in Baringo, because really when you hear about people killing women and children, like today it was all women and children, and the other week it was about a young, 5-day-old child, you are almost wondering whether are we really still seriously talking about people, or have people become something else? So is everything being done? You hear people suggest several things. You had I think at some point the Deputy President saying maybe we need a shoot to kill policy on this because of the atrocities that are going on there. But you had the negative publicity that came with that. But really, when people have reached that level where they are killing children, newborn babies, do you think that it is wrong to shoot to kill such a person? So I know this is controversial, but what is going on in Baringo? Is it politicians who are causing it? This cattle rustling? Some people are saying maybe they took too long. The Pokots fighting every other person. Maybe maybe it wasn't taken seriously, long for quite some time until now it is gone overboard. But I want to really urge the security personnel, whatever it takes, really, that it must be stopped. They must do everything in their power, whatever works or whatever they think is going to bring it to an end. Must be done. All
right, Madam Deputy Speaker, what you support has been, as you agree, an issue of controversy in the sense that the shoot to kill order, many are of the opinion that this could open a can of worms. I mean, it's already very fragile on the ground. Do you not think that this order would complicate further the situation in the sense that we have many people just owning guns on the ground? What do you think?
No, I think what I'm saying is, from what we have had and the length to which, it has gone so far, I cannot see how you can really say it can complicate it any further than it is complicated at the moment. I think it is at the lowest ebb in my view right now, and what needs to happen is anything that can just, stop. Because if you hear what is happening, you are told that like the areas, the terrains, there are no roads, so people just, this surrounding, people just go around, and even the personnel themselves. If you had at some point, they used to say that they cannot even, they are also afraid, as the security personnel are afraid to go in the terrains because they cannot, those raiders know the terrains much better than themselves. So what I'm trying to say is, yes, the government is doing what they can, but they need to do more. We need to do more as a government, and need to do that. Whatever it is that needs to be done very quickly.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I just wish you'd clarify for us exactly what the situation is, because as government, you should be able to access this information. You have all the agencies at your disposal to give you the critical intelligence as to who is causing these conflicts and who is behind this. So, and this question is related to the sort of warning that the president has given in his State of the Nation speech. Who exactly is behind this, and why isn't he acting upon it if he knows who it is? If he doesn't know who it is, why not find out? Because you do have the agencies and the resources that you can use to find out who's behind this.
I think for me, of course, I'm a legislator, so I can't be able to. I'm not in the executive to be able, or in the NIS, or any of those bodies. But I would like to say that clearly somebody somewhere is not doing their job, because all those questions you are asking is really not the president that is supposed to be giving us answers to those questions. We have the NIS as a body. We have the police force. We have all these security personnel, and the atrocities continue. So as much as the president is the overall for everybody, but clearly for it to reach the levels at which it has reached, clearly, there is somebody somewhere who's not performing their job as it should be done.
All right, let's move on to the next subject now. And as the Kenya Defense Forces marks 5 years in Somalia, experts are still divided over whether Kenya should withdraw its forces from there. During the State of the Nation address, President Uhuru Kenyatta today weighed in on the issues, saying that Al-Shabaab still remains a threat in our country and that Kenya will continue its stay in Somalia. The government has been under pressure to withdraw its troops from Somalia and reinforce security within the country. Uhuru reiterated that the ratio of a policeman to a civilian has moved from 1 to 800 to 1 to 380.
Still, the threat remains, and therefore, we continue our mission in Somalia. We know that if we fight the enemy in Somalia, we won't have to fight them here at home. Our engagement as part of AMISOM has yielded significant success.
All right, so we'll take this very fast because I know time is fast running out. And Betty, this is a debate that has been going on, for the 5 years that the troops have been in Somalia. And do you think we are making progress? The president speaks to that ratio of a police man to civilian having, gotten better to 1 to 380. Do you think we are making strides? Is there a reason to still maintain our troops in Somalia?
I believe that in terms of internal security, Kenya needs a lot more support. Or rather, our police and our agencies based within our borders need a lot more support. It goes further than increasing the number of troops that you have. It goes to giving them the resources and the training and the support. For instance, we've just had the conversation where, last week but one, you have actual police refusing to go into certain areas because they're afraid they can't, they won't survive it. And it's true, they don't survive. They are being killed. So when you say a ratio of 1 to 380, where are these policemen? Are they able to do their jobs? There's no point in having all these people who are unable to execute their mandate. And so with that in regard, can we bring back our soldiers and focus on securing our nation's interests and security within our own borders?
All right, Joy, but does that speak to just bringing the troops back, or even, increasing their capacity? Because Betty speaks about, the fear, and we saw that we've been seeing this happening in Baringo, that they feel they need to flee, this conflict zone. What do you think we need to do more to enhance both our internal security within our borders and without?
All right. I'll put it this way. Just like any other job, if we're going to give an example of a newsroom, from the time we actually saw technology coming into play, anchors had to go through, or reporters had to go through the process of learning how these technologies work. Security is just about the same, in a sense that there are all these emerging issues that come up. I mean, before we had Al-Shabaab in Somalia, we all thought Africa is peaceful, until Al-Shabaab showed up and they were killing people all over the place. And that's when African countries thought we need to send troops to Somalia. And so it's the same thing with internal security. There are emerging issues that come up. Like, who knew there would be insecurity in Baringo in 2017?
Right.
And so sometimes the police officers are not well equipped, and they need to be well equipped. They're not well trained for some of these ambushes, for instance, and they need this training, and it needs to happen over and over again.
Right.
Of course, there's also the need for more financing to go into their equipment, like the vehicles. I think some of the counties actually can barely even manage with one vehicle that breaks down a number of times.
Over his tenure, we've seen President Uhuru Kenyatta making a lot of foreign visits, and what has really been consistent in his talks has been partnerships with regard to security. So don't you think we need to give props in the sense of he's doing partnerships with countries such as Israel, which we know to be very advanced in this sector? What do you think, Wangari?
I think two things. One, for the KDF forces in Somalia, we need to have an exit plan. I would not like to see us in a situation where we're in a country indefinitely. We need to have a 5-point plan, 10-point plan, whatever they're calling the plans these days, to say, we're going to help fight Al-Shabaab, but we're going to put in also institutions that will make sure that the youth are being employed, making sure that there are structures to discourage the perpetuation of terrorism. So I would like to see a more robust plan, since that's the word of the session,
day.
Going there. But then with regards to the policemen, I was quite shocked at that statistics. 1 to 380, I'm saying, okay, that's a great number, that's a great statistic, but I don't feel more secure. I don't feel more safe. So it's more about the output, the outcome, rather than the input. If the input is ineffective, then what's the point of having all that input without me still feeling insecure?
And I guess that's a shared sense.
But let me just chip
from
in
what
about
we've seen.
the police officers, the soldiers in Somalia, just for a bit. We also need to take into account that it's not the Kenyan government that pays those officers. Rather, it's actually an AMISOM partnership. And so while we're saying, while we send soldiers over to Somalia, and so we should be thinking of schools on this end and, boosting all these other sectors, I think we also need to take into account how much of Kenya's funds go into some of these projects.
All right. Okay, we have to move on now. And the president ended his address with a message of unity, urging all Kenyans to exercise tolerance during the upcoming general election. He reiterated that the elections would be free and fair. The biggest question is the IEBC ready for the August polls?
The Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, this transition demonstrated our ability to navigate a complex political challenge and averted a constitutional crisis. I congratulate the old IEBC team for a job well done, and I pledge support to the new team. I have full confidence that this team is capable of delivering a credible election, and I call on all Kenyans to provide space for the IEBC to operate as an independent body as it undertakes its important national duties.
Right, Madam Deputy Speaker, many thanks for staying with us. Now, I'll pose this question to you. Do you feel that the IEBC is ready to conduct the general elections coming on in August? And secondly, President Uhuru Kenyatta, and I'll quote, said to the judiciary that there should not be a stumbling block in ensuring the polls are held on the 8th of August. So do you feel that the IEBC is ready and that the judiciary are being a stumbling block of sorts towards this?
Okay, first of all, are they ready? Possibly not very ready, because, I'm happy that we are able to do a smooth transition from the old members of the commissioners into the new commissioners, and that one is done, and we now have the new team, and we see they've started well. And this brings me to the next part now about the stumbling block by the courts. I'm sure you have heard we have so many court cases against IEBC at the moment, and if they are not ready, it's partly because of the cases the court cases that they have right now. We have the procurement ones. I think we have about 3 on procurement of BVR kits. We have on something else and something else. So the problem is, and I think the judiciary needs to address this very, very quickly, because everybody's looking forward to an election.
All right. Many thanks, Madam Deputy Speaker. And many thanks for joining us tonight and for your insights, even as we dissect the State of the Nation address as was given by the President today. Many thanks for your time. Let's now take our Twitter poll. And tonight we had asked you, would you give the Jubilee administration a second chance in office? Would you give the Jubilee administration a second chance in office? And I just want to sample a few of your views. Sia Sapoa says that a big no. Uhuruto are clueless about governance. How much did they spend on ICC? Patrick Langat says, never ever. This government has failed Kenyans completely. We need a whole overhaul of leadership in our beloved country. And Makanji Thomas says, not at all. Another 5 years of grand looting, strikes, tribalism, chest thumping, and grandstanding from the regime. And Amara Gibbs says, the level of failure and strength of the nation are my consideration. I'll take like 2 more. Kamami Wawanjiko says, with every length and strength and with every coin in my pocket, yes, I will. That is a very strong yes right there. And Timothy Nyangena says, well, as for me, the government isn't bad, though. The problem is the counties, which are full of corruption cases. Of course, we cannot separate that. This is the first, of the implementation of the devolved government. And just a total of this, 34% have said yes, they would give the Jubilee administration a second chance. 66% of you are opposed to a second term by the Jubilee government. I'll just take quickly as we wrap up. Time is incredibly short. Your thoughts about giving Jubilee a second chance, or rather, your performance ratings of Jubilee very shortly as we wrap up.
I think for every voter, it depends on exactly what you think you gained from the government or what you think the government did for you, and not just the central government, the county governments too. I think it's time all politicians are held to account, right from the president to the MCA and to the last person involved.
So holding them to account. Yep. Betty.
I think that Jubilee's performance over the last 4 years is not as well as or as good as they hype it to be, and that is seen in the sort of voter apathy that you've witnessed in the just concluded mass registration process, where you've seen, especially, and I'll point this out, that in central Kenya in 2012 there was a turnout of 93%, and right now the expected turnout for the August elections is at 60% maximum.
So a big drop.
So a big drop, even in your own backyard.
Levels of apathy.
And that sort of apathy shows the sort of lack of faith and lack of hope that Jubilee has put in people. So I'd say that they'd have to do something drastic in the next 6 months to change that.
Something drastic that have to do. Wangari, what's your take? State of the nation.
My take is that it's a difficult time for any government to be ruling Kenya right now. Devolution is a very dynamic, unpredictable, disloyal partner, and one day it can be great, and the next day it could be completely tragic.
But there's historical things that just fell on the laps of this administration.
Yes, and so I think in my mind I try to think of the counterfactual, who could have done it better. I'm not sure. That's a very hard question to ask. So in terms of the performance, I'm just, well, I really can't say. I just think they've done their best, and I hope that whoever comes next will.
So they've done their best and victim of circumstances as well. Joy, there's been a lot of talk about the economic performance. What's your take about the state of the nation?
Well, it's tough times. Honestly, there's nothing to lie about. Cost of living has shot up, and we can actually almost think that the Kadogo economy is the most hurt in all of this. And while it all seems rosy at the top, I think there's more attention that needs to be paid to the people in the rural areas, because that's where the majority Kenyans live. So as the Jubilee administration seeks a second term, or whoever it is wants to come into office, they need to take into account the fact that the economy is not doing as well as it was doing maybe 2 years or 3 years ago. And so if they take into account that, and that they are actually working for the people of the country, they'll be able to deal with issues like corruption. I think we have been dealing with corruption with very smooth hands. And so, you know, the babying of the culprits is not really making a difference. So I think that needs to be sorted out.
All right. Many thanks. Many thanks, ladies, for your time and for your insights tonight on this very critical discussion. And that's where we wind up this edition of News Sources. Many thanks for your feedback and for being with us throughout the show tonight. That's where we wrap it up. My name is Sharon Momanyi. Have a good night. Up next, we have Ben Kitili and Sophia Wanuna continuing this ball, addressing the states of the nation on KTN Prime tonight. Have a good night.